When you pretend to be mute, you hear everything. Every whispered insult, every casual cruelty, every secret. For 10 years, Ivy Caldwell had perfected the art of silence, head down, eyes averted, hands always busy with some menial task that made her invisible to everyone who mattered. She was scrubbing blood from the Alpha King's training leathers when she heard the words that would unravel everything. "Dorian's getting desperate," Lord Garrett's voice carried from the corridor outside the laundry room, where Ivy knelt beside a wooden wash basin. 3 years without a mate, and the council's starting to question whether the moon goddess has abandoned his bloodline entirely. "Can you blame them?" Lady Simone's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "An unmated Alpha King at 31? It's embarrassing. My daughter is perfect for him, but he won't even look at her. Just trains and broods and pretends the kingdom isn't falling apart around him." Ivy kept scrubbing, her movements steady and mindless, playing the part of a simple-minded servant. She'd been perfecting this performance since she was 16, since the night her village burned and she'd fled with nothing but the clothes on her back and a secret that would get her killed if anyone discovered it. The nobles moved on, their voices fading, and Ivy finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands stilled in the bloody water as she thought about the Alpha King, Dorian Ashcroft, the man whose clothes she washed, whose quarters she cleaned, whose presence she'd spent a decade carefully avoiding despite working in his household. She'd seen him, of course. You couldn't miss a man like Dorian Ashcroft, 6.5 feet of barely contained violence, with dark hair that fell into eyes the color of smoke, and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, a souvenir from the war that had made him king at 28. He moved through the palace like a storm, and servants scattered before him like leaves in the wind. Suddenly, the door to the laundry room slammed open with enough force to rattle the walls. Ivy didn't look up. Servants who made eye contact with their betters ended up assigned to the pits, but she felt his presence like a physical weight. The air itself seemed to compress, charged with the kind of power that made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin for the first time. "You." Dorian Ashcroft's voice was rough granite, each word precise and sharp. "The mute girl who cleans my quarters. Come with me." Ivy's hands froze in the wash basin. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. 10 years of silence. Was it all about to end? "Before we continue, please prove my mom wrong. She says I can't hit 1,000 subscribers. Now back to the story." Ivy stood slowly, water dripping from her reddened hands, and kept her eyes on the floor as she followed the Alpha King from the laundry room. The other servants watched with a mixture of pity and relief. Better her than them, whatever the king wanted with the mute girl. It wouldn't be pleasant. It never was when Dorian Croft summoned servants personally. He led her through corridors she'd cleaned 1,000 times, past tapestries depicting battles and coronations, past guards who straightened at his approach. Ivy's mind raced. Had someone discovered her secret? Had she slipped up, spoken in her sleep, let her wolf show in her eyes? But if they knew what she was, she'd already be dead. Wolves of her bloodline didn't get trials or chances to explain. They got executed, their bodies burned, their ashes scattered. Dorian stopped at his private chambers and held the door open. Ivy hesitated for a fraction of a second before stepping inside. The room was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Bed made with military precision, weapons cleaned and arranged on their racks, books stacked neatly on the desk by the window. She cleaned these quarters every day, moving through them like a ghost, while Dorian was occupied with council meetings or training. She'd never been here while he was present. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Ivy kept her eyes down, her hands clasped in front of her, and waited. Dorian crossed to a cabinet and pulled out a crystal decanter filled with amber liquid. He poured 2 glasses, drained one in a single swallow, then turned to face her. "Do you know why I called you here?" Ivy shook her head, the movement small and servile. "Because you're the only person in this palace I can trust." He laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Ironic, isn't it? I don't even know your name. The head housekeeper just calls you the mute girl, but you've been cleaning my quarters for, what, 5 years? 6. actually. Ivy had worked in the kitchens for the first 4 years after arriving at the palace, keeping her head down and her mouth shut while she learned the rhythms of court life. Then old Margaret, who'd cleaned the king's quarters for 20 years, had died in her sleep, so Ivy had volunteered for the position. Everyone else was too afraid of Dorian's temper to want the job. Ivy had wanted it precisely because it kept her close to power. "I've been poisoned." Dorian said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. 3 days ago, at the council dinner. Something slow-acting, designed to look like natural illness. My healer confirmed it this morning, but she doesn't know what kind of poison or who administered it, which means I can't trust anyone in my inner circle. He moved closer, and Ivy forced herself not to step back. She could smell him now, something that made her wolf press against her skin as like it was trying to claw its way out. "So here's what's going to happen." Dorian's voice dropped to something quieter, more dangerous. "You're going to stay in these quarters. You're going to watch everyone who comes in and out. And you're going to tell me—" He paused, seeming to remember. "Right. You can't tell me anything." Ivy's fingers twitched. She could write. She'd taught herself years ago, painstakingly copying letters from discarded books until she could form words. But revealing that skill meant revealing intelligence, and intelligence led to questions she couldn't answer. Dorian was watching her with those smoke-colored eyes, and for a moment Ivy thought he could see straight through her careful facade to the terrified girl underneath. "Can you write?" The question hung in the air. Ivy's mind raced through possibilities. Lie and maintain her cover, or reveal one secret to protect a larger one. She nodded slowly. Surprise flickered across Dorian's face, or maybe it was reassessment. He moved to his desk and pulled out paper and a pencil, setting them on the surface. "Then write what you observe. Anyone who touches my food, my wine, my weapons. Anyone who lingers too long or asks too many questions. Can you do that?" Ivy nodded again. It was a reasonable request. A smart one, even. The mute servant who everyone ignored would be the perfect spy. "Good." Dorian drained the second glass of liquor. "There's a cot in the adjoining room. You'll sleep there until this is resolved. I'll have your things brought up." He paused. "Do you have things?" Ivy's entire worldly possessions consisted of 2 spare servants' dresses, a comb with missing teeth, and a small knife she kept hidden in her mattress. She shook her head. "Right. Well, I'll have proper clothes sent up. You can't be my personal attendant looking like that." He gestured vaguely at her stained servant's dress. "Dismissed." Ivy moved toward the adjoining room, a small space that probably used to be a dressing area before Dorian had converted it to storage. There was indeed a cot, narrow and bare, but it was still better than the servants' quarters where she slept on a pallet on the floor with 20 other women. She was almost through the door when Dorian spoke again. "And girl, if you betray me, if you're part of this conspiracy, I'll know. And I'll make sure your death isn't quick." Ivy didn't react, didn't turn around. She simply closed the door and sank onto the cot, her hands shaking now that she was alone. She'd survived 10 years by being invisible, by making herself so small and insignificant that no one looked twice. And now she was trapped in the Alpha King's quarters, close enough to the very danger she'd been avoiding that she could practically taste it. Her wolf stirred again, pushing at the barriers Ivy had built to contain her. Oracle wolves like her weren't normal. They didn't just shift between human and animal. They saw things, knew things, could read the threads of fate that bound people together and pull them apart. The night her village burned, Ivy had seen her own death in the flames, seen herself older, standing beside a man with smoke-colored eyes, seen the exact moment a blade would pierce her heart. She'd been 16 and terrified, and she'd run because the alternative was accepting that destiny. Up until now, she'd successfully avoided Dorian Croft, had made sure their paths never crossed, that he never looked at her long enough to recognize what she was. And now she was sleeping 20 feet from his bed, bound by his command to watch and record and report. Fate, Ivy had learned, was relentless. You could run from it, hide from it, build walls against it. But eventually it found you anyway. She just hoped she'd survive the finding. The first 2 days passed in a tense routine. Ivy stationed herself in corners of Dorian's quarters, her hands always busy with mending or polishing, while her eyes tracked every visitor. The council members who came to brief the king on territorial disputes, the healer who brought bitter-smelling tonics that Dorian drank without complaint, the weapons master who delivered newly sharpened blades. She wrote everything down in careful script, noting times and behaviors, and the small details that most people missed. Lord Garrett touched the wine decanter but didn't pour from it. Lady Simone's hands shook when she passed Dorian a scroll. The healer's eyes lingered too long on the king's throat, like she was measuring something. At night, Ivy presented her notes to Dorian, who read them with growing frustration. "None of this is enough for an accusation," he said on the third evening, throwing the papers onto his desk. "I need proof. Real proof." Ivy stood silent, waiting to be dismissed. But Dorian didn't dismiss her. He poured himself whiskey and moved to the window, staring out at the darkened palace grounds. "Do you know what it's like," he said quietly, "to suspect everyone around you of wanting you dead? To look at people you've known for years and wonder which one is waiting for the right moment to strike?" Ivy knew exactly what that was like. She'd lived it for a decade. "The council thinks I'm paranoid, that the poison was an accident, contaminated food or wine from a bad barrel." Dorian laughed without humor. "But I felt it the moment it entered my system. Felt something foreign trying to shut down my organs one by one. If I were fully mated, the bond would have helped me fight it off. But unmated alphas are vulnerable in ways most people don't understand." He turned to look at her, and Ivy made sure to keep her eyes on the floor. "You probably think I'm mad, talking to someone who can't respond. But there's something peaceful about you, knowing you can't repeat my words, can't use them against me." If only he knew. If only he understood that Ivy heard everything, remembered everything, and that the secrets he confided now were all being catalogued in her mind. "The healer says I have another week, maybe 2, before the poison does permanent damage." Dorian's voice had gone flat, resigned. "After that, I'll start losing motor function, then cognitive ability, and whoever poisoned me will step forward to claim the throne, probably with some story about how they tried to save me but couldn't." Ivy's hands clenched. She shouldn't care. Dorian Croft was just another alpha, just another powerful man who would use people and discard them. But something in his voice, in the weary acceptance of his own death, made her chest ache. Her wolf surged forward, pressing against her control. "Help him," it seemed to say. "Save him." But helping meant revealing herself, and revealing herself meant death. Dorian drained his glass and set it down. "Get some rest. Tomorrow the full council meets, and I need you watching everyone. Someone will slip up. They have to." Ivy nodded and retreated to her small room, but sleep was impossible. She lay on the cot and stared at the ceiling, feeling the threads of fate pulling tight around her. Oracle wolves could sometimes change destinies, could pull at threads and rearrange them into new patterns. But it required power, required letting her wolf fully surface, and Ivy hadn't done that in 10 years. She didn't even know if she still could. Around midnight, she heard Dorian cry out. The sound was muffled, but unmistakably pain. Ivy rushed to his door. Dorian lay in his bed, his body rigid with agony, his skin slicked with sweat. His eyes were wild, unfocused, and his hands clawed at his chest like he was trying to rip something out. The poison. It was accelerating. Ivy grabbed the bell pull and rang for the healer, then moved to Dorian's side. She'd watched Margaret tend to sick nobles for years. She knew the basics of fever care, of keeping someone from hurting themselves during seizures. Dorian's hand shot out and caught her wrist with bruising strength. "Can't breathe," he gasped. Without thinking, Ivy placed her free hand on his chest. Her wolf surged forward before she could stop it, and suddenly she could see the poison, dark threads winding through Dorian's system, choking his heart, strangling his lungs. She could see the exact moment he would die if nothing changed. He had 18 hours. The vision faded, and Ivy found Dorian staring at her with eyes that had gone from smoke to molten silver, his wolf rising to the surface. "What?" he whispered. "What are you?" The door burst open and the healer rushed in, flanked by guards. "Everyone out," she commanded. "Now!" Ivy tried to pull away, but Dorian's grip on her wrist tightened. "She stays," he gritted out. The healer looked like she wanted to argue, but one glance at Dorian's face changed her mind. "Fine, but stay out of my way." For the next hour, Ivy watched the healer work, administering counteragents and herbs that seemed to ease Dorian's symptoms but didn't touch the underlying poison. Finally, the woman sat back, her expression grim. "I've done what I can, but, Your Majesty, the poison is beyond my skill. It's designed to be resistant to conventional treatments." "How long do I have?" Dorian's voice was steady despite the pain still etched on his face. "Days. Maybe less if there's another acceleration like tonight. Get out, all of you. Except her." Dorian pointed at Ivy. The guards exchanged glances but obeyed. The healer hesitated, then bowed and left. The door closed with an ominous finality. Dorian pushed himself up to sitting, his eyes never leaving Ivy's face. "I felt something when you touched me. Something that pushed the pain back." He reached out slowly and took her hand. "Do it again." Ivy shook her head frantically. She couldn't. Wouldn't. Revealing her abilities meant, "Please." The word was quiet, raw. "I'm not ready to die. Not like this. Not without knowing who's trying to destroy everything my family built." Their hands were still touching. Ivy could feel the poison in him, could feel her wolf straining to help, to heal, to pull those dark threads loose and let him breathe again. She'd spent 10 years hiding, but what was the point of survival if she let a good man die when she could save him? Maybe this was why fate had pushed them together. Maybe the vision she'd seen at 16, herself standing beside this man, his blade in her heart, had been incomplete. Maybe there were moments before that ending that mattered too. Ivy closed her eyes and let her wolf rise. The sensation was overwhelming. Power flooded through her, and with it came the sight, the threads of fate that connected everything and everyone, shimmering in the air like spider silk. She could see Dorian's thread, strong and silver, currently tangled with dark strands that were slowly choking it. She reached out with her wolf and began to pull. The poison resisted, wrapped tight around Dorian's life force. But oracle wolves were created to manipulate fate itself, including death. Ivy pulled harder, unraveling the dark threads one by one, feeling them dissolve under her touch. It was agonizing work, like pulling thorns from flesh, but she kept going until the last dark strand dissipated. Dorian gasped, his back arching off the bed. Then he collapsed, breathing hard but steady. The deathly pallor had left his skin. His eyes, when they opened, were clear. "What did you do?" he whispered. Ivy pulled her hand back, her wolf retreating beneath her skin. But it was too late. She'd revealed herself, and now she had to face the consequences. She moved to his desk, took up the pencil with shaking hands, and wrote 4 words. "I'm an oracle wolf." Dorian stared at the paper, baffled. "Oracle wolves are myths, stories parents tell children to make them behave." Ivy wrote again. "I wish that were true." "But they're extinct, hunted down centuries ago because they were too dangerous." Dorian's expression shifted from disbelief to dawning horror. The village that burned 10 years ago, the one in the Northern Territories where they said rebels were hiding. He looked at her. "Was that you? Your village?" Ivy nodded slowly. "Yet you've been here. In my palace. Right under everyone's noses." Dorian stood, swaying slightly, and moved toward her. Do you know what you've done? You just saved my life. But if anyone finds out what you are, you'll be executed within the hour. The council won't bother with a trial. Ivy knew. She'd always known. But watching Dorian die had been somehow worse than facing her own execution. She picked up the pencil again. You can turn me in. I'm too dangerous to keep alive. Turn you in? Dorian's voice was incredulous. You just saved my life. And more than that, you saw the poison. You know what it was, don't you? Your kind can trace things back to their source. Ivy hesitated, then nodded. Oracle wolves could see the past woven into the present, could follow threads backward to find where they originated. Then look. Dorian gripped her shoulders, his eyes intense. Look, and tell me who's trying to kill me. This was dangerous. Using her abilities this extensively after 10 years of suppression could burn her out completely. But Dorian had asked, and Ivy found she couldn't deny him. She placed her hand on his chest again and let her wolf see. The threads unspooled backward, showing her the council dinner 3 nights ago. She saw the poison being poured into Dorian's wineglass by careful hands. Saw those same hands arranging for the contaminated barrel story, covering tracks, ensuring no one would suspect until it was too late. She saw the face of the poisoner. Ivy's eyes snapped open and she stumbled backward, horrified. Dorian caught her. Who is it? Tell me who. She couldn't write it, couldn't make herself form the letters. Because the face she'd seen was the last person anyone would suspect. The healer. The woman who'd been treating Dorian, who'd been administering counteragents. The woman everyone trusted. Ivy picked up the pencil with shaking hands and wrote a single word. Healer. Dorian's face went absolutely still. Freya. She's my father's healer. She's served our family for 20 years. That's... He looked at Ivy, and she saw the moment he decided to trust her. Show me. If you can see the past, show me what you saw. Ivy had never tried to share a vision with someone else. She didn't even know if it was possible. But she placed her hand over Dorian's heart again and pushed. The vision flooded them both. Ivy felt Dorian stiffen as he saw through her eyes. Freya's careful hands, the poison being poured, the cold calculation in her expression. And then more. Earlier visions, threads she hadn't consciously examined. Freya receiving payment from someone outside the palace. Freya meeting in secret with Lord Garrett. Freya, years ago, being passed over for a promotion that went to someone else. Revenge, power, ambition. The usual reasons people betrayed their kings. The vision released them both, and Ivy sagged. She'd used too much power, burned too bright. Her wolf retreated deep inside, exhausted. Dorian caught her before she could collapse. I've got you, he murmured, lifting her easily and carrying her to his bed. He laid her down carefully, then sat beside her. Rest. You've done enough, Ivy. Wanted to shake her head, wanted to tell him that knowing wasn't enough. He'd need proof, would need to move carefully, or Freya would disappear, and he'd have nothing. But her body wouldn't cooperate. The exhaustion swept through her. Sleep, Dorian said softly. His hand brushed hair back from her face, the gesture unexpectedly gentle. I'll take care of this. I promise. Ivy's eyes drifted closed. The last thing she felt was Dorian's hand resting on her shoulder, warm and solid and safe. When she woke, it was to raised voices. Ivy pushed herself up on shaking arms and realized she was still in Dorian's bed. Sunlight streamed through the windows. She'd slept through the entire night and into late morning. The voices were coming from the main room. Ivy slipped out of bed, her body still weak, and moved to the door. Absolutely insane. Lord Garrett's voice was sharp with anger. You're accusing Freya based on what? The word of a mute servant? Your Majesty, with all respect, the poison is perhaps affecting your judgment. Search Freya's quarters. Dorian's voice cut like a blade. You'll find evidence. She's been working with someone in the council, someone who wants my throne. And if you're the one she's been meeting with, Garrett, I suggest you confess now before I have to drag it out of you. Silence. Then Garrett spoke again, and this time his voice was different, dangerous. You have no proof. No witnesses except a girl who can't speak. The council will never... The sound of a scuffle. Something breaking. Ivy pushed the door open to see Dorian with his hand around Garrett's throat, holding the older man against the wall. Garrett clawed at Dorian's arm, his face turning purple. I don't need the council's permission to execute a traitor, Dorian said softly. I am the law here, and you just confirmed your guilt by threatening my witness. She's not witness, Garrett choked out. Can't testify. She doesn't need to speak. Dorian squeezed harder. Guards! 2 men burst through the door. Take Lord Garrett to the dungeons, and bring Freya here, now! The guards hesitated only a moment before obeying, dragging the sputtering Garrett away. Dorian turned and saw Ivy standing in the doorway. You shouldn't be up yet. He crossed to her in 3 strides and caught her elbow when she swayed. You nearly burned yourself out last night. Oracle wolves can die from overusing their abilities, can't they? Ivy nodded. She'd known the risk. Foolish, Dorian murmured, but there was something soft in his expression. Brave and foolish. Before Ivy could react, the door opened again and guards dragged in the healer. Freya looked between Dorian and Ivy, and understanding dawned on her face. The mute girl. She told you. She showed me. Dorian's voice was cold. I saw everything. The poison, the payments, your meetings with Garrett. You've been planning this for months. Years, Freya spat the word. Your father promised me the position of head healer. Promised it would be mine when old Henrik retired. But then Henrik died, and your father gave the position to that simpering fool from the southern packs. 20 years of service and I was passed over like I was nothing. So you killed him. It wasn't a question. I made sure he never woke from that illness, Freya smiled, sharp and bitter. And I would have done the same to you if that girl hadn't interfered. What is she anyway? Some witch you've been keeping secret? None of your concern, Dorian nodded to the guards. Take her to the dungeons. She'll stand trial for regicide and attempted murder. As Freya was dragged away, still spitting curses, Dorian turned back to Ivy. They stood in the sudden silence, and Ivy became acutely aware that she was still wearing yesterday's clothes, that her hair was a mess, that she probably looked half dead. I suppose we should talk about what happens now, Dorian said quietly. Ivy's stomach dropped. This was it. The moment where he'd decide she was too dangerous to keep around, no matter that she'd saved his life. Oracle wolves weren't pets or tools. They were threats to the natural order. Every alpha who'd ever encountered one had made the same choice. Eliminate the threat. She waited for the guards to return for her. Instead, Dorian said, I need to mark you. Ivy's head snapped up. She must have misheard. The council will demand to know how you knew about Freya. If I tell them you're an oracle wolf, they'll execute you within the hour. Dorian moved closer. But if you're my mate, they can't touch you. Royal mates are protected under the oldest laws, even oracle wolves. Ivy grabbed the pencil from his desk with shaking hands and wrote, We're not mates. You said yourself you haven't found yours. Haven't I? Dorian took the pencil from her and set it down. When you touched me last night, I felt the bond snap into place. Felt it like lightning in my veins. You're my fated mate, Ivy. The moon goddess has a sense of humor, apparently. Ivy stared at him. The bond? She'd been so focused on healing him, on pulling out the poison, that she hadn't felt. But now, with him standing this close, she felt it. That golden thread connecting them, thrumming with power and possibility. It had formed when she'd let her wolf fully surface, when she'd touched him with her true self instead of her carefully constructed facade. She shook her head frantically and wrote, The vision, when I was 16. I saw myself die from your blade in my heart. If we complete this bond, then we change that future. Dorian took her hands, stopping her frantic writing. Oracle wolves can see possible futures, but they're not set in stone. Every choice creates new threads, new possibilities. He was right, but he was also asking her to bind herself to him permanently, to step out of the shadows and into a life where everyone would know what she was. I'm not forcing you, Dorian said softly. If you want to leave, I'll help you disappear. Give you money, a new identity, safe passage to anywhere you want to go. But Ivy, his thumb brushed across her knuckles, I'm asking you to stay, not just because you're useful or because the bond demands it, but because in 10 years of ruling, you're the first person who's been honest with me. Even your silence was more truthful than everyone else's words. Ivy's eyes burned with tears. She pulled one hand free and wrote, If I stay, people will try to kill me. Oracle wolves are feared for a reason. Then they'll have to go through me first. Dorian's expression was fierce. I'm the Alpha King. My word is law. And I'm choosing you, Ivy. However dangerous, however complicated, I'm choosing you. The words settled over her like a blanket. Choosing. He was giving her a choice, the thing she'd been denied 10 years ago when her village burned and fate had decided her path. She could run again, could disappear into another life, another identity, spend another decade hiding. Or she could stay. Accept the bond, the danger, and the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could change the future she'd seen. Ivy picked up the pencil one more time and wrote, The mark. It will hurt. I've survived worse. It will bind us permanently. You won't be able to take another mate. I don't want another mate. Dorian cupped her face in his hands. I want the woman who saved my life. The woman who's been invisible for 10 years but sees everything. I want you, Ivy. Just as you are. She set down the pencil and reached up to touch his face, tracing the scar that ran from temple to jaw. He leaned into the touch, his eyes falling closed. Then Ivy tilted her head to the side, exposing her throat. The traditional sign of acceptance. Dorian's eyes opened, molten silver. Are you sure? Ivy nodded. For the first time in 10 years, she felt absolutely sure. Dorian leaned within, his lips brushing the junction of her neck and shoulder. This will hurt, he warned, echoing her words. Then his teeth sank into her skin. The pain was white-hot and immediate, but beneath it was something else, the bond blazing to full life, golden and unbreakable. Ivy felt Dorian in her mind, felt his fierce protectiveness, his relief and his determination to keep her safe. Felt herself reflected back through his eyes. Not weak, not broken, but strong in ways she'd never recognized. When he released her, blood on his lips, the mate mark burned silver on her skin, permanent and undeniable. There, Dorian said roughly. Now you're mine, and I'm yours, and anyone who wants to hurt you will have to kill me first. Ivy touched the mark, feeling it pulse with warmth. Then she did something she hadn't done in 10 years. She opened her mouth and spoke. Thank you. Her voice was rough from disuse, barely more than a whisper, but it was hers. Dorian's eyes went wide. You can speak? I always could. Ivy's lips curved into a small smile. I just chose not to. But I'm tired of hiding. If I'm going to be your mate, your Luna, then I need to stop pretending to be less than I am. Then speak. Dorian pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Speak and let everyone hear you. Let them know exactly who their new Luna is. That afternoon, Ivy stood beside Dorian as he addressed the full council. She wore clothes befitting her new station. Deep blue silk that made her skin glow, her hair braided in the style of royal mates. The silver mark on her throat was clearly visible. The council members stared at her with varying degrees of shock and suspicion. They'd all known the mute servant girl. None of them had expected this. "Lords and ladies," Dorian began, his voice carrying through the hall, "I present to you my fated mate and your future Luna Queen, Ivy." The murmuring started immediately. Ivy felt dozens of eyes on her, calculating, assessing. "Some of you may question this match." Dorian's hand found hers, their fingers lacing together. "Let me be clear. Ivy saved my life when all of you failed to see the threat among us. She has proven herself more loyal and more capable than many in this room, and she is mine. Anyone who challenges that challenges me." Lady Simone stood, her expression carefully neutral. "Your Majesty, we mean no disrespect, but the girl she was a servant. Surely there are more suitable matches." "My mate is not negotiable." Dorian's voice dropped to a growl. "But since you seem concerned about suitability, perhaps you'd like to know what else Ivy is." Ivy's heart hammered. He was going to tell them, going to expose her completely. "My mate," Dorian continued, "is an oracle wolf, the last of her kind. She sees the threads of fate, can trace the past and predict the future. She is blessed by the moon goddess herself, with abilities your pack histories speak of in reverent whispers. And she is under my protection, by the oldest laws of our kind." The silence was absolute. Then chaos erupted. "Oracle wolves are dangerous. She could execute her before—" "Silence!" Dorian's alpha command rolled through the hall, forcing every wolf to their knees. "I am your alpha king, and I have claimed my mate according to our laws. The old laws state that royal mates cannot be harmed without committing treason against the crown itself." Dorian's voice cut through the protests like a blade. "Any attack on her is an attack on me. Any plot against her is a plot against the throne. Are we clear?" The council members slowly rose from their enforced submission, but the fear in their eyes remained. Ivy felt it like a physical thing, their terror of what she was, what she could do. Oracle wolves hadn't been seen in 2 centuries for a reason. They'd been hunted to extinction because they knew too much, saw too much, could unravel carefully kept secrets with a single touch. "Your Majesty," Lord Castellan spoke carefully, the old man's voice trembling slightly. "The laws you cite are ancient. Surely you understand our concern. Oracle wolves were eliminated because they posed a threat to whom?" Ivy's voice rang out clear and steady, surprising even herself. "To power-hungry nobles who feared having their schemes exposed? To corrupt officials who didn't want their crimes revealed?" She stepped forward, Dorian's hand still firmly in hers. "I have been in this palace for 10 years. I have cleaned your chambers, washed your clothes, served your meals. I have been invisible to all of you, and in that invisibility I have seen everything." Lady Simone's face went pale. Lord Castellan's jaw tightened. Others shifted uncomfortably. "I know about the skimmed taxes," Ivy continued, her gaze sweeping the room. "The falsified reports. The servants punished for crimes they didn't commit, while nobles' children got away with worse. I've seen it all, heard it all, but I never spoke because I was too busy surviving." She turned to look at Dorian, whose expression was fierce with pride. "But my mate is right. I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending to be less than I am. So if any of you have a problem with what I am, with what I can do, then perhaps you should ask yourselves why you're so afraid of the truth being known." The silence that followed was different now, charged not with fear, but with reluctant respect. Dorian raised their joined hands. "My mate has spoken. Does anyone else wish to challenge her right to stand beside me? No one moved. No one spoke. Good. Council dismissed. We'll reconvene tomorrow to discuss Freya's trial and Lord Garrett's sentence. Dorian's voice softened slightly. And perhaps we should also discuss reforms to ensure no one else feels the need to hide what they are in order to survive in my kingdom. As the council members filed out, avoiding Ivy's gaze, she felt the weight of what she'd just done settle over her. She'd revealed herself completely, made herself a target. There was no going back now. Come, Dorian murmured, leading her from the council chamber. You need to rest. Using your abilities and facing the council in one day, you're exhausted. He was right. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, leaving her hollow and shaking. But as they walked back toward his chambers, their chambers now, she supposed, she felt something else too. Freedom. For the first time, she didn't have to measure every movement, guard every expression, ensure she never revealed too much intelligence in her eyes. She could just be. They'd barely entered the chambers when Ivy's legs gave out. Dorian caught her easily, lifting her into his arms. I've got you, he said, the same words from the night before. Always. He carried her to the bed, his bed, which she'd made every morning for 6 years, without ever imagining she'd sleep in it, and laid her down gently. Then he stretched out beside her, pulling her against his chest. You terrified them, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The entire council, shaking in their boots because a servant girl told them she'd seen their secrets. Former servant girl, Ivy corrected, her voice muffled against his shirt. I'm a Luna now, apparently. Not apparently. Definitely. His hand stroked through her hair. How does it feel? Terrifying, Ivy admitted. I spent 10 years making sure no one noticed me. Now everyone's going to be watching my every move. Yes, Dorian agreed. They will. Some out of fear, others out of suspicion, and a few out of respect. He tilted her face up to meet his gaze. But I'll be watching too, and anyone who tries to hurt you will answer to me. Ivy touched the mate mark on her neck, still warm and new. You can't protect me from everything. Oracle wolves have enemies you don't even know about. There are people who've been hunting my kind for centuries, people who believe we shouldn't exist. Then we'll face them together. Dorian's expression turned serious. Ivy, I need you to understand something. When I marked you, when I claimed you in front of the council, I wasn't doing it just to protect you. I was doing it because you're mine. Because the moment you touched me, and I felt that bond snap into place, I knew I'd never want anyone else. Even though I lied to you for 6 years, you survived. There's a difference. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. And you saved my life when you could have let me die and disappeared into another decade of safety. That means something. Ivy closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. The vision I had when I was 16, the one where I saw myself die with your blade in my heart. I haven't looked at the threads since then, haven't checked if that future changed. Don't do it, Dorian said firmly. Not tonight. We'll face whatever comes tomorrow. But Ivy was already drifting, her wolf finally quiet after years of restless hiding. As she slipped into sleep, she felt Dorian's heartbeat steady against her cheek and thought that maybe some futures were worth the risk. She woke to chaos. Shouting in the corridor outside, the sound of running feet, and then someone pounding on the door. Your Majesty, there's been an incident! Dorian was up and moving before Ivy could fully process being awake. He yanked open the door to find a guard, wild-eyed and breathing hard. What incident? The dungeon, Your Majesty. Lord Garrett and Freya, they're dead. Both of them. Ivy's blood went cold. She pushed herself out of bed, ignoring her protesting muscles, and moved to Dorian's side. How? The guard's eyes flicked to her with barely concealed fear before returning to Dorian. Poison. Same kind that was used on you, from what the healers can tell. but self-administered, they think. They each had vials hidden on them. They killed themselves rather than face trial, Dorian said flatly. Or someone killed them to keep them quiet about who else was involved. He turned to Ivy. Can you see? Can you trace back what happened? Ivy's wolf stirred uneasily. She was still depleted from yesterday, and tracing the dead was different from tracing the living. Harder. The threads got tangled, confused. But she nodded anyway. Take me to them. The dungeon was cold and damp, lit by flickering torches that cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. Freya and Garrett lay in their separate cells, their bodies already stiffening with death. Ivy approached Freya first, steeling herself before placing her hand on the dead woman's chest. The threads unspooled, but they were murky, confused. She saw Freya in her cell, pacing, saw a guard approach with food and water, saw Freya's hand move to her mouth, saw her swallow something, saw her collapse. But the guard's face was hidden in shadow, deliberately obscured. Someone with power had made sure this death couldn't be traced back to them. Ivy moved to Garrett's cell and found the same thing. Threads that led nowhere, faces hidden in shadow, a death that looked like suicide but felt like murder. She pulled back, swaying, and Dorian caught her elbow. Well? Someone powerful is covering their tracks, Ivy said, her voice hoarse. Someone who knows about Oracle wolves and how to hide from our sight. That takes skill and resources. It has to be someone on the council, Dorian concluded, his jaw tight. Someone who conspired with Garrett and Freya, who's now eliminating loose ends. Your Majesty. Another guard appeared, this one carrying a sealed letter. This was left at the gates this morning. The messenger was gone before anyone could question him. Dorian took the letter, broke the seal, and read. His expression darkened with each line. Finally, he looked at Ivy. It's a threat against you. He handed her the letter. The handwriting was elegant, educated. Your Majesty, congratulations on finding your mate. How unfortunate that she's an abomination who should have died with the rest of her kind. Oracle wolves upset the natural order. They see too much, know too much, interfere with fate itself. You have 1 week to renounce her and send her away. If she remains in the palace after that time, we will take action. Not against you. You're the king after all, and we need you alive. They see too much, know too much, interfere with fate itself. You have 1 week to renounce her and send her away. If she remains in the palace after that time, we will take action. Not against you. You're the king after all, and we need you alive. But accidents happen. Poisons slip into food. Blades find their way between ribs in crowded corridors. She's not worth dying for, Your Majesty. Send her away, and we can all return to the natural order of things. A concerned citizen. Ivy's hands trembled as she read. This was what she'd feared, what she'd known would come the moment she revealed herself. There were always people who feared Oracle wolves, who saw them as a threat to be eliminated. They think they can threaten you in my own palace, Dorian said, his voice deadly quiet. They think they can dictate who I keep at my side. They're not wrong about one thing, Ivy said softly. I am dangerous. Oracle wolves can see the threads of fate, but we Kensuke also pull them, change them. That makes us unpredictable, uncontrollable. Good. Dorian took the letter and tossed it into a torch, watching it burn. I don't want controllable. I want you. Even if keeping me starts a civil war, even then. He turned to face her fully. Ivy, I've spent 3 years ruling a kingdom where everyone wants something from me. Everyone has an agenda. Everyone's playing an angle. You're the first person who's ever been honest with me, even when that honesty was silence. I'm not giving that up because some coward sends threatening letters." Ivy wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could face this together, but the vision from 10 years ago lurked in the back of her mind, herself standing beside Dorian, his blade in her heart. "I need to see," she said quietly. "Need to check the threads. See if that future has changed." He flinched at that, but nodded. "All right, but not here. Let's go back to our chambers." Our chambers. The words sent a flutter through her chest even as dread pooled in her stomach. Back in their rooms, Ivy sat on the bed and closed her eyes. She let her wolf rise slowly, carefully, not wanting to burn herself out completely. The threads of fate shimmered into view, thousands of them, millions, connecting every person and every choice. She found her own thread easily. It glowed with the silver gold of the mate bond now, connected permanently to Dorian's. She followed it forward, looking for the moment of her death. There it was, the vision crystallized. She stood in a great hall, older by several years. Dorian beside her, his face twisted with anguish, a blade in his hand. And then... But wait, the vision was different now. When she'd seen it at 16, it had been simple. His blade, her heart, death. Now there were more threads, more complexity. She saw the moment leading up to it, saw herself protecting someone, saw Dorian forced into an impossible choice. She saw her death, but she also saw what came after. Saw Dorian destroy the one who'd forced his hand. Saw him burn the kingdom down in his grief. Saw him follow her into death rather than live without her. And then she saw the other possibility, the one where she didn't die, where she pulled different threads, made different choices, where she trusted Dorian enough to let him protect her, and he trusted her enough to let her protect herself. Both futures existed. Both were possible. The threads trembled with potential, waiting for the choices that would determine which one became real. Ivy opened her eyes to find Dorian watching her with barely contained fear. "Well?" he asked roughly. "Do I kill you?" "You might," Ivy said honestly. "If someone forces your hand, if they put me in a position where you have no choice. But Dorian," she reached for his hand, "I also saw the future where you don't. Where we both survive. Where we change what seemed inevitable." "Then that's the future we choose," Dorian said immediately. "It's not that simple. The threads don't just change because we want them to. We have to make the right choices, trust each other completely, be willing to—" Dorian kissed her. It was sudden and fierce and desperate, cutting off her words. When he pulled back, his eyes were molten silver. "I choose you, Ivy. In every future, in every possibility, I choose you. Whatever choices I have to make, whatever threads I have to pull, I will make sure the future where you survive is the one that comes true. Even if it costs you your crown? Even then," he said without hesitation. "A crown means nothing without you beside me." A knock at the door interrupted them. Dorian growled in frustration but called, "Enter." A young servant girl stepped in, her eyes wide with fear. "Your Majesty, Luna, the council has requested an emergency session. They say it's urgent." "Of course they have," Dorian muttered. He looked at Ivy. "Ready to face them again?" Ivy thought about the threatening letter, about the futures she'd seen, about the choice ahead of her. She could run, disappear into the night and return to a life of safety and silence. Or she could stay and fight for the future where she and Dorian both survived. She stood, straightened her shoulders, and met Dorian's gaze. "Let's go show them exactly what an oracle wolf can do." His smile was fierce and proud. As they walked toward the council chamber hand in hand, Ivy felt the threads of fate trembling around them, waiting to see which future they would choose. For the first time in 10 years, she wasn't running from destiny. She was walking toward it, with her mate beside her, ready to fight for the life she'd never dared to want. The rest of their story would be written in the choices they made in the days to come. But in that moment, walking through the palace corridors with Dorian's hand in hers, Ivy finally understood what it meant to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved for exactly who she was. It meant being brave enough to speak after years of silence. It meant trusting someone enough to let them protect you. And it meant believing that some futures were worth fighting for, even when the threads of fate said otherwise. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that, Ivy decided, was worth any risk. Thank you so much for listening. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. And if you enjoyed my story, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.